doing a discussion with my buddy Zach. You want to mention
Hello.
channel?
Oh yes, I'm another booktuber. My name is just Zach Granite. That's Granat. I have another booktuber review channel, and hopefully you guys might be interested in subscribing to it. This is our first collaboration.
Yes, indeed. So we're gonna come on and do a video discussion on the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which the review of mine should be up. Zach, maybe you want to do a review because you read the book again, didn't you?
Yes, I I loved it. I read this book a couple years ago, back in probably around middle school or so, and I read the whole series of 5 books. My opinion, Nervith, he really disliked it, but I loved the first book. I think it's like classic books, and they're just really hilarious to me. And I have a lot of things to talk about. We're into things like characters, themes, writing style, stuff like that.
Yes, definitely. So we definitely do have big differing opinions. I am of the opinion that I rated it a 1 star on Goodreads, and Zach, you rated it a
5 stars.
yes. So a big difference here, and I think that I've outlined my points fairly well enough that I know why I don't like it, but I'm going to go over it with Zach today. So we can start off with characters, right? Characters. So what did you think of the characters first?
So the characters are, as the problem with many comedy novels, is that, they tend to suffer by not having the best characters or plot. The characters in the book, they're basically not the most interesting, but I think for what they are, they basically get the job done. I think what's kind of nice about them, and you see this in later books over time, is that they're, for the most part, kind of not the smartest people. Like, they're kind of dumb, kind of average, yet regardless, they find their own special niches and skill sets later on. Like, I don't want to spoil anything. I don't know if you can continue this series or not, but they're interesting.
Yeah. We definitely let me actually point that out. We are going to be spoiling a lot of things. Okay, so this is a spoiler video. Go ahead and spoil everything.
That's actually
this is a discussion, right? This is a discussion. We want to get into everything, and because why wouldn't anybody watch this without reading the book? So it doesn't make sense to not spoil. So let's go into everything. Go ahead and spoil whatever you want.
So what I got other than is that he kind of captures the idea of being, and also the characters in general, they kind of capture the idea of being idiots who have the good intentions but aren't always the brightest people. And you notice there's a bit of depth though of Zaphod. Zaphod is a character who he was my least favorite when I originally read the books. I never really was able to like him. In this book, though, rereading it, I kind of gained an appreciation for him because you can tell that the author has this sort of dynamic with his personality, whereby he knows that he's not the best person. He knows he's too chaotic. He knows he's too confusing. But that's the only way he can live life, and that's why he's almost like helpless. I thought it was interesting.
What was that guy's name again? What was his name? That's the president.
Oh, sorry, Zaphod Beaverbrox.
So he was the president, right?
Yeah, did they have 2 heads?
Okay, yeah, that guy. Okay, he was the guy that was piloting the ship thing, kind of, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just getting it back in my head. I do remember most of it though. That character. So I found that character to be the most interesting character that was in the book. Okay, but the problem was, let's say that there's 2 different. There's a main character. This is how good they should be in terms of characterization, everything. Okay, plot, in terms of personality, everything. This is where every side character should be. Now, the side character you just mentioned, the guy with 2 heads, is like up here. So he's good. He's a good character. He has enough characterization. But every main character is down here, which is a big problem because none of them have any person. They have personality, but nothing more than a 2-dimensional. This is the kind of guy you are, and then that's all they have to them. If they had been replaced with another character, I don't think that the story would have suffered at all. It's just the characters really played no part in the story at all. It's just the plot kind of doing stuff on its own.
Actually, I kind of have to agree with you there. The way I see it, though, I guess for a comedy book, for me, the characters, they're not great overall. They're probably arguably not even good overall, but they get what they need to be done. I like the idea of being a bunch of kind of idiotic people who are basically well-meaning, but have various flaws and don't know what they're really getting into going throughout the universe. But they're not really good characters. If you're just sort of person who likes characterization in books, then you're really not going to like this series in general, because that's something that doesn't even really improve much, I would say. The characters, they fulfill their purpose enough, but they don't really go beyond that.
Yeah, in terms of characters, I would say they're the minimum that's required to get through this plot. Whereas they easily could have been like a good character. I think if what's his name, Douglas Adams had wanted to write it better, he easily could have. And I just think, it has the room for this, but he didn't do it, and that's why I rated it so low on this front too. It had the capacity to be a really good character, but they just weren't. So that's why I gave it a 1 star. But If you think that, I think that's a fair point to bring up, that it's just enough to keep the story going. But of course, if you were to say that about another story, that's just not a good argument, because if you were to say that about the Stormlight Archive, you know, Dalinar is a good enough character for the story. That's not a good argument. He's the main character. He should be destroying everything. He should be like the most interesting person, even if he's not interesting on its own. But we should know like how interesting he is and be engaged with this character because of that, right?
Yeah, I see what you mean. So they're not. I mean, I guess like the Stormlight Archive is like a big epic fantasy series, which is like hundreds of thousands of words. You kind of, and most of it is character focused. But the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is actually very fast paced and short. So for me, there's not too much of a need for the characters to be good. But for a series like the Stormlight Archive or the Wheel of Time, you need to have very strong characters, because like 90% of those books is just character development.
So if I were to switch this around, I did read Coraline. Have you read that?
I've heard of Coraline, I haven't read it.
Okay, so I'm not going to spoil it, but Coraline, it's a very short book. It's much shorter than Guardians of sorry, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, of course. Um, but the thing is, in Coraline, although the plot was kind of interesting, it was a good plot, I found that the character in that was surprisingly good. It was a much shorter novel than this. It was much more fast-paced. I think it was equally as fast-paced, but it really, Neil Gaiman, he really dove into the character of Coraline. And I think, you know, if you were to compare the two, I think the character in Coraline would have been like destroyed this, because, and that's just like sort of my argument towards it. It's a short book. You can't really use that as an argument towards it not having good characters. I think it still needs a good enough characters. It easily could have had that. It had enough space for them, but he just didn't have it. And so that's kind of where I am. So you want to give your final thoughts on this front, and then we can move on to the next one?
I guess my final thought is just, yeah, the characters, they're not good, but I still think that for what the story is trying to be as a comedy novel of people who aren't very smart, just getting thrown into a huge plot that they have no control over, I think that it works well enough for what it is. So now on to our next point, which I believe...
It's writing style. So, to touch on the plot thing, we will be going over plot heavily later on. I think that might be the big chunk of this, but it is a very big part of the novel that I really want to focus on. So we'll keep that on our minds until later on, but then we can, for now, we'll just go over to writing style. And I think I'll go on first this time. Writing style, I was not a fan of it. It was super dry. I seriously couldn't stand it. I was reading the first 10 pages and I just put it down. I'm like, this is a bad writing style. And that might be something other people enjoy. So I can't really fault you if you enjoyed this writing style, but for me, I read 10 pages and I couldn't, and I'm just like, why did I pick this? It was supposed to be my, I was reading Peace and Turmoil in between this, so I was kind of halfway through, and then I picked this up because I wanted a break, and I really regretted it. So I really couldn't stand the writing style. Maybe if I had enjoyed it more, then I would have liked the book more, but it wasn't even an easy read to get through, you know?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Well, I mean, so like the writing style is dry. It's fairly minimalistic in how it works, but I kind of liked it for that. So what I kind of admire in a writer, like I'm a big fan of like really long, flowery stuff, but I also like simple stuff whereby when the writer, he writes sentences and things, but he'll give you like just enough information in order to keep on going. Like for instance, I was kind of thinking, sounds kind of weird, of Conan the Barbarian, those are short stories I love. And the writing style in those is known for being like only a few sentences are needed to create a scene. And Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it's not necessarily on that level, but what they do is he describes scenes and characters in kind of minimalistic detail, but the details he does give you, in my opinion, are just strong enough for you to know exactly what's going on. Like he'll describe some big planetary event or some person, and it'll give you just enough detail for you to understand what they're like, what they're going on. I actually like that aspect of it. But it is a dry writing style, though, I agree.
Yeah, so something I've learned about in the past year is that one thing that writers really, really want to focus on is the fact that they want to make their prose do two different things at once. They want the prose to describe something while also providing a hint of something else. Like if you were going to say, I was trapped in a cardboard box, you wouldn't just say, I was trapped in a cardboard box like Douglas Adams would. You would say, I was trapped in a stifling, dark cardboard box. You want to add emotion to that, and I think that's where this book really suffers. Although it does have the really short, punchy stuff, it didn't even include enough to bring a real emotional weight to the narrative or to the characters or to anything. And so, you're right in that it does It is a very really simplistic writing style. I think that there's two definitions of simplistic. The simplistic for the sake of being simplistic and not wanting to describe more, which I think that this is, and they're simplistic in the name of wanting to not waste your reader's time, but putting as much as you can into the simplistic writing style, which is what I would consider Brandon Sanderson to do. So there's two big fronts here, and I would go with Douglas Adams not really adding too much. The simplistic writing style doesn't add much to the story, and it just, without the extra meaning, it's just so dry. And I couldn't stand that at all.
I see what you mean. For me, like it also, this is our later point we'll address later, but like just to go into briefly, it ties into the humor a bit because British humor is known for being dry and matter of fact.
Yes, so the British Office, yeah.
Yeah, so like when they don't describe something in much detail, or they describe in a few detail, but they're doing like a witty way of the sentence structure or whatever, then like that makes sense to me for how to the humor. But that's, I guess, all I can really say for that.
Okay, that's fair enough, because the humor, of course, it is very different, British and American humor. So that might be not why I didn't really like the humor at all. Spoilers for the rest of the video, but that at the same time, it's like it's my own review and it's your review too. So I would assume we would have the American sense of humor, but we still felt that it was very different, right? You really enjoyed the humor from what I could tell, and I didn't. So even then, there's a big divide between American readers. So there's that we want to discuss later on. But the writing style, in general, we both agree it's dry. I think that it's far too dry and it doesn't add anything else. Well, summarize your points really quick in like a sentence or so.
Oh, I suppose for me, it'd be the writing style is simple but witty, and it gives you enough information for you to picture what's going on.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I do respect that kind of writing style. That is a fair writing style. I enjoyed in this book though, so that's cool. We have some kind of a agreement there that it's really dry. So we can go on to themes, which I think you might want to start us off on.
Oh yes. So for me, what's interesting about the themes here is that this book is basically nihilistic. So it posits the idea that our life.
I think it's nihilistic.
Oh, sorry, nihilistic. Whatever. So it's nihilistic. So the idea is that like our life in the universe is meaningless, right? Because that's what they say, the meaning of life being 42. It is not really worth trying to find a meaning of life. It's pointless. And things happen in the universe which are completely absurd. But what Douglas Adams' idea is that even though the universe doesn't have a point and it's meaningless, it can still be fun and enjoyable because you can appreciate how absurd everything is. That's what I like about it. It's actually like we're both fans of Daniel Green. He's another booktuber. And he did a video about nihilism, and he explained how he himself is a nihilist. But what he means by that is not in a depressing sense, which is normally associated with, but he believes that since there's no meaning to life, you can make of life whatever you want it to be. And that's what I really loved about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It posits the main theme of the book is basically the universe is meaningless, but that's not a bad thing. It means you can do whatever you want.
So for the sake of this video, would you consider yourself a nihilist?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I like the idea.
All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and say that I'm not. So that might be a big divide on the theme, because the theme is something you agree with, whereas I don't at all. So in fairness, but I don't think that I took that into account in my review at all. It might have a completely different theme to what I was looking for, but if you make it interesting, if you make it cool, I think that's a fair assessment of a book. You can make it a really cool theme that I disagree with, and I'll rate it high because it's an interesting exploration. But I feel like although it didn't really explore the theme, it kind of assumed it and went along with it, which kind of annoyed me a little bit. But that's cool on its own. And then it just goes on, and the theme itself, I noticed your theme near the ending. But if I went through the book knowing the theme, I think there would have been very little big points that are pushing the theme. It's something that you kind of pick up at the end and nowhere else. So although the theme, it's interesting, I guess it wasn't, I don't think it was put into effect in the right way.
Okay. I think that actually for me, I was thinking about nihilism when I read the book, actually, while I was rereading it, because it was just something I hadn't thought of much when I first read it. So I did notice things like the most obvious is definitely, 42 being the meaning of life. I think there's some other stuff.
That's a good one. I do like that one. That's a smart one.
But there's other things like, how really crazy, inexplicable coincidences happening. Like, for instance, when Arthur Dent, he's talking at some point and his message is relayed through time and space to an alien civilization that's at war with another alien civilization. and that continues their conflict. And then they go to Earth when it's done to get revenge, but then they're eaten by a dog. It's just like the idea is really absurd, ridiculous things like that. Is basically Douglas Adams' way of saying the universe doesn't make any sense and doesn't have meaning, but that's fine. It's kind of funny.
Okay, well, those are coincidences, and okay, so that was a little bit funny, I guess, but it wasn't. I guess it's British humor, I would assume. So I didn't really think that was the funniest thing, but I do like that scene. That was an interesting scene to say the least. So themes, what did you think of it? I think it's okay. It's okay. I don't have to complain there, but it's not great in my opinion.
Yeah. I like the theme because I like the idea of the nihilism it presents, whereby the universe has no meaning, but that's not a bad thing because universes can be a joke and you can laugh at it, and that's the fun thing to do.
Okay, so implementation, I guess, is where we disagree there.
Yeah.
Theme itself, not a bad idea. How it was implemented, not that great. Okay, so here we get to the big chunky one, the plot of the book. So I think I'll go ahead and start off because I think that I was really big on plot while I was doing my own review. Plot for me is meant to make the book really digestible. It's supposed to make it interesting, and it's supposed to be a beginning, middle, and end. And that's what a plot feels like to me. To make it feel like a plot itself, make it feel like a story. This book did not have any of that. It kind of just skipped around doing things that were completely unrelated, which I guess is part of the theme that you mentioned. But for me, it was not enjoyable because of that. There was no enjoyment in just getting rid of a problem just by accident. They just teleported somewhere else, and I found no enjoyment in that. There was no satisfaction. The plot was completely all over the place, scattered. It wasn't interesting at all until maybe the final few scenes, which at that point, although it was interesting, I don't think it made much sense, and because of that, it was very it gave me no satisfaction.
So I think the book definitely had a very simple plot, but it's one I think kind of makes sense. So when I was reading this, I was thinking of this other book I read called The Color of Magic. I won't go into too much detail. But it's the first book in a series called Discworld, which is kind of like the fantasy equivalent of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But in that book, I thought it was very funny, but there was basically no plot whatsoever. Or there was a plot, but it made no sense. In this book, I'd say it's like one or two steps above. And the reason I say this is because, so if you look at the book through the lens of the meaning of life being 42 and them trying to find the meaning of life, it kind of makes sense because the idea is Earth was the supercomputer that was being used to try and find the meaning of life, and it got destroyed. So then the mice, who are the alien beings who went to Earth in order to manage it, they try to track down Arthur. They try to get the meaning of life, so they try to get Arthur's brain when they're on Magrathea. And the whole reason they went to Magrathea was so that they could try and find the meaning of life because Arthur Dent was the last human being there. I think if you look at it through that perspective, it's not the best, but I think if you look at it that way, the plot kind of makes sense. But I will agree, a problem for not just comedy books, but comedy TV shows, comedy movies, anything related to comedy, is the plot is usually very weak. This doesn't have the best plot, it just has a serviceable plot.
What you're connecting here is, from what I'm seeing, you're connecting about maybe the first 20 or 30 pages to the last 50 to 80 pages, right?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense because that's when they mention the Earth being destroyed at the beginning, and then at the end they explain that the Earth was a supercomputer designed to find the meaning of life.
Right. So if I were to go through that with you, right, you start off the story with the Earth being destroyed, okay, and then at the end we're explained why the Earth was destroyed and why the Earth exists. But however, the problem is the middle. What goes on in the middle has no effect on anything and has no meaning whatsoever. So we start at the beginning. They end up going off to an alien ship. They end up getting teleported to another alien ship where they meet, I think, somebody they've met before, and they travel to to another planet to try to get rich. And then on that planet, they discover the reason why Earth was destroyed. So if you look at the middle three plots, it has no bearance on the other two plots. It's literally, they could have been removed. They immediately could have been teleported from the beginning, since they were teleported, obviously. They could have been teleported to the final section, to the planet, and easily the plot would have been resolved. Because if you look at any other decent novel, in my opinion, you will find that the middle is essential. You will find so many things in the middle that you need to understand it and enjoy the ending. For example, what have I read? Coraline. One big thing that you need to understand in Coraline is the relationship that she has with her neighbors and with her mother and with her family and the outdoors and the indoors, her relationship with the world. And that's kind of made big in the middle. Okay. And if you had removed that, the beginning and ending would have no connection whatsoever. And I think that's what makes a good middle, a good plot. And Douglas Adams has none of that in this story.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I guess I kind of revised my own things with the plot. It's not even really a serviceable plot. It's kind of like a not even entirely there plot, I guess. Yeah, I didn't read it for the plot, but if again, it's another thing of the characters. If you're looking for a strong plot and characters, you're not going to get it all in this book.
If you ask me, I would pick up a book for the sake of plot. Characters would be somewhere in the second or third place, but I really want to enjoy the plot the most. That is the big thing. And if I'm picking up a humor book, right, I expect there to be a plot. And, even if it's a mildly uninteresting plot, you would expect more humor. But I feel like there should be a plot in place, whereas this book is just flopping around, not really doing much at all. And, the humor might have made up for it, but I don't think it could have made up for the lack of satisfaction I had in the story because of there being no plot.
Yeah.
Right?
Actually, I will say, if I remember correctly, the third book in the series was actually my favorite because that one actually had the strongest plot. It was about them trying to save the universe. I don't remember everything about it, but I don't know if you're getting to the books or not, but if you did, I would look forward to book 3 probably. Actually, book 3 and unfortunately the kind of unfinished book 5 had the strongest plots. But yeah, the other book series don't really have much in the way of plot.
Right, but of course, there's the classic argument. A book should hold up on its own. It should not be a part. This felt like, if anything, it felt like a beginning. Okay, if this was the beginning to a massive plot, that would be so much better. But to just put a beginning into a paperback book and sell it, that's no good. And because of that, I'm not going to go in and read the rest of the Hitchhiker's plot. But just don't spoil it either way because we don't know who's watching the video. So
I'm not going to mention it. I don't even have much memory. I just remember book 3 was my favorite.
Right. Book 3 might have been the favorite. Might have been the best, but of course I'm never gonna get to it because the first book had nothing to it that I cared about.
But you know what? Actually, if you want plot and humor books, there's this book called Good Omens I read. It was by Terry Pratchett and Neil
Good
Gaiman.
Omens. That's the one that so I was debating between 2 different comedy books. There was this one and Good Omens, which I just picked up like last week, and I've got them both on my shelf. I really want to read a short book before I jump back into Peace and Turmoil, which is why I picked up this one. It's much shorter than Good Omens, but I am looking forward to Good Omens to maybe put a better taste in my mouth from this other comedy book.
Yeah, I think you'd like it. So Good Omens has a British sense of humor, but it actually does have a coherent plot. And there's like an objective they're trying to... Yeah, that book actually makes more sense plot-wise. You'll probably enjoy that one more.
I would. But, okay, so you understand why I didn't rate it a 5-star, obviously. You see my points, right? But you think that it's fair for me to give it a 1-star with what I've mentioned so far?
Well, I mean, like everyone's review is their own review. I think if the book really didn't do it for you, you can give it a 1-star. For me, though, I thought it was just a very good book and a classic, so I just give it a 5-star.
Okay, so we can jump onto the last one, right? That might be a big one that might affect our views.
Humor is last, right?
Humor, right? You want to open up on that?
The humor is perfect. I mean, you want to agree with me, but I thought this was just a funny book. I was laughing and smiling as I read it. Like, even I remember how the jokes were, a lot of them, but they still made me crack up because it's just like, basically Adam's style is he parodies things in the modern day and he takes things from Earth and he puts them in space. Like things like bureaucracy, things like secretaries, things like people's weird little habits and stuff like that, and the weird way they behave and the reserved styles of speaking, all that sort of thing. He takes all these things from Earth society and specifically British society, he puts them into space, and they're hilarious because they're exaggerated to such great degrees. Whether it's the Vogons literally trying to destroy Earth so they can make a highway bypass, or the police officers at the end of the book supposedly being really sensitive and in reality being really brutal, or the meaning of life being 42, or just all these sorts of things are just really funny. And even on Earth, which is supposed to be the normal place, is itself really funny and absurd. Time to do there.
Right. So if I were to go on, I want to mention some of these things. Do you have any specific jokes that you thought were amazing? Because I have 1 or 2 that I thought were okay, and those were at the top of my list. So do you have anything that you want to mention?
Okay, I remember at the beginning of the book, there was the guy who was like that bureaucrat who was overseeing the demolition of Arthur Dent's home, and he was a direct male lineal descendant of Genghis Khan. I thought that was hilarious.
Okay, so if you ask me, that's not, it was interesting to bring up, and I didn't even smile at that because it might have been good if the setup had been better, but because this is an absurdist novel, I understand why there was no setup. But to me, it's just like it has no meaning. There was no good setup to it. It had nothing that I would want in a joke. You know, a joke would be a setup and a punchline. There was none of that. It was just um, an absurd fact, which to me is like third grade humor. So I didn't care for it.
Yeah, I see. I mean, for me, the joke what they do is they take an idea and they carry it through all the way. Like for that guy, they keep mentioning how he is the direct male lineal descendant of Genghis Khan throughout that entire chapter. Oh, there's another joke I like too, because have you heard of this? The idea that if you have an infinite number of monkeys and an infinite number of typewriters.
I do. Yes, I know that one.
They made a joke about that in the book, and they're like, these are in the infinite improbability drive, and all these really improbable, crazy stuff are happening. And at the end of it, it's like, hey, one of them says, we've got these monkeys in the other room, and they want to show us a script they worked out for Hamlet. I thought that was hilarious.
Oh shoot, that's actually kind of good. That was an interesting one again. That had a setup and a punchline, kind of in a way, but to me, still, it wasn't a strong one. It came out of nowhere. It was it's kind of a connection to the improbability thing, but it really came out of nowhere. It was not a big kind of connection to the main plot. Now, I do want to mention one of the jokes that I found. It was right at the beginning, and it's the only one that made me laugh throughout the entire thing, and it was the Jesus one. You remember that?
Oh, the one he's like, oh, hey, it says one guy decided that, hey, maybe it'd be nice if we were all nice to each other for a while, but then he got nailed to a cross. That was funny.
He got nailed to a tree, yeah, and that was a funny one. I enjoyed that because that was the topic that they were discussing. They were talking about how people were just not nice, and so to connect that and to put a final punchline on that, that was a good joke, and I really enjoyed it because it was an interesting one. It was a way that I had never thought of it before. It was a very innovative joke. Okay, it was a great one. I like that a lot. But if you go into the later stories, I find that none of them have the same connection to me. I remember one that I remember distinctly. It was that they were in the pod about to be launched into space, I believe, into because they had been caught by the Vogard or something.
Vogon? Yeah.
Vogon, yeah. So you remember that scene, right? I'm not just making it up.
Oh, and are you talking about when Ford is like, look, there's a lever, and up there it's like, really? And Ford says, nope. Just kidding.
That's the one, and I'm just like, that's just such a like tapping you on the back, and then you turn around and there's nobody there, and it's like, got him. Like that's not a good. That's kind of like a third grade joke. I don't understand. So if you have like the Jesus joke at the beginning, that was very relevant. That was very interesting, and then you have this kind of joke, which is just a tap on the shoulder. It's not funny when that's the main majority of the jokes that are present. There are some things that I find kind of interesting as well, like the ones you mentioned. You brought up some things that I totally missed, but still, those feel like third grade humor to me. So I didn't enjoy the humor. I smiled a couple times. I think I would guess 4 or 5 times throughout the reading of this book. I laughed once because of the Jesus joke, but apparently it's one of the funny. Like if I look on Goodreads, it's like everybody's praising it for being one of the most funny, interesting, smart books of all time. Neil Gaiman does that, so I'm like, am I that dumb? But I don't know. Everyone's praising it for being this funny, genius book, and I just can't see the jokes. Like the jokes are all third grade jokes. It's all British comedy, which of course I don't get, and stuff like that. And I do want to mention, I'm kind of destroying this book a little bit by being mean to it, and I'm sounding really negative. So just in case anyone's like getting mad at me, I'm doing it for the sake of this video. Usually I'm trying to like be really happy on the channel and cut out any part that I'm being really sad in and depressing or whatever. And I try to make it like kind of interesting. So, but here you're going to see all of it. You're going to see all the like me ranting about books. So yeah, that's my point about humor. What do you think?
Oh, well, the way I see it, so for British humor, like this with Monty Python, they had things like they never actually had like punchlines or setups really. The idea was the whole situation, the whole sketch was the joke because it was just really weird and absurd. That's this kind of book. There are a couple like standard jokes, but for the most part, the idea of the humor is that there aren't really. You could say there's not even really jokes per se. It's just like
a humor situation, I guess.
Yeah, humorous situations. That's the whole idea of the humor, and I love that. But it's definitely not for everyone because not everyone likes that kind of humor.
Right. It's like for me, if you put a humor situation, it's a joke drawn out. Like it's a joke that you repeated 50 times. And it's the highway joke. that kind of extended into being a joke about how the Earth was made, why the Earth was made. And if you extend a joke that much, it's no longer funny to me. Like if you have the same joke, I feel like it's the same like general joke being extended, and it's so absurdist. And I understand why that humor makes sense, but this joke was just drawn out too long with too many uninteresting details, which with such a not great punchline and not a great setup either. And of course, I think every single joke needs to be some kind of a setup punchline. Even a situation like you're talking about, it's just a different kind of setup and different kind of punchline. But in this, none of the parts that I would consider a setup and a punchline did anything great for the story. The ending was kind of interesting, but I didn't even at that point I was kind of getting bored and my brain was like not having it. So I'm just like, oh, okay, mice wanted to destroy the world. Okay, dolphins are geniuses, sure. And I just went along with it because I didn't care at that point.
Yeah. One thing, so when we think about future books in the series, this book actually sets up a lot of future jokes that occur in the series. They go back to them. But again, this clearly isn't the series for you.
You want to list one or two of those?
Oh, okay. So they actually go into the title. So remember the dolphins when they say, "So long and thanks for all the fish."
Mm-hmm. Oh, wait, was that from this?
Yeah.
Whoops! I just sent. I was looking online for something because I was leaving a group chat and because they were roasting me so hard, and I was looking for something that said "so long" and some kind of a joke, and I found that. I forgot that was from the book. Okay,
yeah,
that's
so long
cool.
and thanks for all the fish. But you see, it was in this book originally, but they used it as a title for the fourth book. And there's a bunch of jokes in this book that they will set up for later jokes, if I can remember correctly. Like the meaning of life thing, they actually bring that back up again in the third book, and they actually explain a little bit more what it's supposed to mean, which is why I like that book so much.
Okay, so I can see that. I see that might be interesting. So, of course, I've heard that you need to read the entire series or you need to reread the book to make it funnier, right? That's what I saw on Daniel's live stream when I watched it. Not this one, the last one. You were on this one, weren't you?
You mean the one he did on yesterday, Saturday?
Yeah, you were there, right? I missed it.
Yeah, I was there.
I missed it by like half an hour.
I remember Nightbot was like starting a police state, and they were doing Orwellian tactics, and they were suppressing people who did all caps.
Yes, exactly. So there was that, right? But the live stream before that, I mentioned it to him in the chat, and he said that you need to reread the book to make it funny. It's not funny unless you reread the book. Okay, I'm probably saying it wrong, but he says reread the book, then it'll be funny. So I want to point out here that if it wasn't funny or interesting in the first place, I have no interest whatsoever in rereading the book. It was just I want to put it away. I bought it for my sister. I thought that she would enjoy it for Air, if you've seen her in another video. But I don't think I'll give this to her because it's so in my opinion, it's really one of the worst books I've read in a long time. It's praised so highly. It's so underwhelming, things like that. So I kind of that's my general thoughts on this book.
I actually don't like the attitude Daniel has with that. Like, if you didn't like the book the first time, I don't see why rereading it would make you like it more. Since I've already read, liked the first time, and I still liked the second time. But if you really didn't like the first time, I don't think it's going to get better because like the jokes aren't going to change. Now, if you don't like that style of humor, that's fine. I'm perfectly fine if you're not liking the book. I personally disagree, but like you have very valid points against it.
Okay, so you've definitely changed my mind in terms of humor and humor and plot by a little bit. Humor definitely a lot because you brought up some things that I thought were not funny at all, but you've said them again, and this time, it kind of rung some bells that were actually kind of humorous. So you've changed my mind on humor for sure. I don't think that I'll be increasing my rating though. So do you think that I've affected any of your thoughts on this book?
I think you actually, yeah. So you made a point. The characters are basically like okay at best, and the storyline is honestly like you're right. It doesn't fulfill like what normal plot is supposed to do, and a lot of events occur kind of meaningless. But I still love it anyway because just how really humorous it was. Now everything in it is just there's really one humorous situation to another humorous situation, and I just have the whole book was just really funny for me. But yeah, if you don't like the humor, it's just not gonna be for you.
Yeah, how long did it take you to read the book?
Oh, like in 2 days. It's a short book.
2 days. Okay, that's not bad. It took me. Okay, hold on. I have it written down, I believe, in the back. No, okay, I don't have it. But it took me like a good 4 or 5 days because I was just putting it down every 40 pages, kind of not caring about it. I thought I would read this in just one day and jump back into Peace and Turmoil. But this book was really, really not like there was nothing stringing it together. I had no interest in continuing it. But of course, it's only a 200-page book. I don't want to be DNFing a 200-page book, right? So I didn't want to be that weak, so I just went ahead and read it. So that wasn't that great. But okay, so I guess this generally ends our discussion on this book. Do you have anything to say?
Oh, no, I think I think we're pretty good.
Okay, so that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this discussion. Anybody who's watching, we'll be posting this to both of our channels, so you don't really need to skip ahead and watch the other one. But if you did enjoy our conversation, be sure to check out the other channel because, you know, I think that you're a very good channel. Even though I've never really read any of the books that you reviewed, I still enjoy your videos because you bring up some good points in terms of these books that I've never heard before. And I really do enjoy your content. So definitely check out Zach. He's a great YouTuber. And I think that ends our discussion.
Yeah, I'll promote your channel. Nervith is a great YouTuber. He's also really great, like great friend of me because he actually he knows a lot about editing and stuff, and he helped me out. He actually helped me change the layout of my channel very early on to look more professional. He was just really helpful for that. So I definitely recommend subscribing to Nervith.
All right, I'll be editing this video up and giving it to you too. So we're gonna be putting this video on both of ours. We'll do some other discussions if anybody wants to hear it in the description, or sorry, in the comments. I keep saying description for comments, but I am reading this book right now. Okay, my actually camera is kind of trash, but The Way of Kings. Okay, I'm reading that currently. Maybe if somebody wants, we could do a discussion, me and Zach. That might be cool. What do you think of that? You would have to reread it, right?
I would have to reread that, and that would probably that's a big book, so it'd probably take me a couple weeks. But maybe.
That's true.
Yeah, I love the Stormlight Archive. That's probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite, book series right now. So I wouldn't mind rereading it, but it probably would be a while.
In fairness, I should probably finish because personally, I think I'm going to finish the Stormlight Archive within the next 2 months, or 3 months.
Oh, well, I'm done. Yeah,
that might be better if I just finish the Stormlight Archive and get back to you. Can you remind me what the 2.5 book name is?
Oh, it's called Edge. I actually haven't read it, but it's called Edge Dancer.
Edge Dancer. Okay, cool. So I'll definitely be picking that up within the next, maybe not 3 months or so, but definitely within the end of the year. I can guarantee that because so far it's really, really good. And I'm enjoying that much. We also have plans to perhaps pick up Malazan together, maybe.
Possibly. Again, that's probably like maybe late this year or next year because it's a really long series. We have a bunch of stuff we want to read before then.
Yeah. So I'm personally gonna, since you've already read like all the fantasy books that I plan to read, you know, I've only picked up fantasy this year or just early last year. I'm gonna finish off the Kingkiller Chronicles for sure. I'm gonna be finishing Stormlight Archive for sure this year, and I'll possibly get into Game of Thrones, Wheel of Time, and likely Malazan. If also finish up Dark Tower if within this year. So I probably be doing a ton of fantasy, and maybe we'll have some comparisons. We may be able to do another discussion, and basically that's probably going to be good. So thanks you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this discussion. If you did, please leave a like down below and subscribe to both of our channels. Make sure to check us out, see what we're doing, and let us know in the comments if you want to see us do any other discussions. If you have any thoughts on this book that we didn't bring up, or if you have any comments about this video, anything at all, we would love to hear it. Yeah, so thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.
Bye.